Hello, folks, and welcome to today's discussion on behalf of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Today, we're going to talk about engine overview of engine company success involving a couple of company and chief officers from across the United States. Just a few things from an etiquette perspective. All of you that have logged in, first of all, thank you for logging in, and I have all of you on mute. However, if you have a question, a question or a suggestion or comment, feel free to use the chat feature, and we'll do the best to go ahead and answer that question or repeat that suggestion that you have out there. As always, it's great to have a diverse group of presenters on here because, as we know in the American Fire Service, the end goal is the same. But the end, let's say the objective is to put out a fire. Same end goal, no matter where we are, whether we're in St. Louis or in Oakland, California, but how we go about accomplishing those task level activities to satisfy their end goal, they will vary. So as we go through this, some of this stuff you may agree with, some of you may disagree with. We ask that you continue to look at things from an open-minded perspective. And as you can see here down at the bottom of our screen, you have a quote from the famed John Wooden, former coach with the UCLA Bruins, historic career, and one of his quotes is, "When I am through learning, I am through," and this is applicable to any profession. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with some introductions. Chief, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and your position with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, and then followed by Larry out of St. Louis.
Sure, no, I appreciate it. This is going to be, I'm looking forward to this afternoon. I am Brian Zaitz, currently Assistant Chief out of Kirkwood, right outside of St. Louis. Currently, I just was reelected to another term. So this next term, I'll be serving as the second Vice President of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. I know these are challenging times we're dealing with now in the fire service with the current COVID-19 restrictions and quarantine. So we're trying to do some different things with the ISFSI. This being one of them, obviously, trying to reach out to our membership to provide them some awesome trainings with some of our great members, Damon and obviously Larry being a couple of our star members, and get their trainings out there to you guys as the members so you guys are not feeling so cooped up and actually getting some quality training. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm really, like I said, I'm pretty jacked up and excited for this this half hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever we do. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Zaitz. And then last but surely not least, Mr. Larry Conley out of St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, how's it going, Conley? Captain in St. Louis, and been there, just celebrated 28 years.
Is it me or did we temporarily lose Larry?
I think we temporarily lost Larry, maybe.
Yeah.
He might be.
I know.
I've
been told the 11 o'clock hour is a bad hour on Zoom. We're not the only ones that are using Zoom, so hopefully he'll come back up momentarily. In the interest of keeping us going, I'll do an introduction of myself, and then we'll get going. So once again, all of you who have called or logged in on behalf of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors and the fire service in general, thank you for taking time out of your day to sit in on this discussion of engine company success. My name is Simmons, and in addition to being a member of this great organization, I'm also a member of the Oakland Fire Department. Of the three, that will be the most junior. I'm going on year number 23 in the fire service, and 2 years short of the halfway mark. And yes, that is correct, 2 years short of the halfway mark. The end goal is to do 50 years in the fire service, and I enjoy the profession that much. Some of you may think you're crazy. I think that way sometimes too, but nevertheless, that is the end goal, God willing. But I'm currently, right now, I'm on detail. I'm the Special Operations Chief with the Oakland Fire Department, and what that entails, I run 5 programs. Those programs include ARF, our technical rescue, our hazmat, our water rescue, and I also serve as our department safety officer, or ISO, incident safety officer. So, but when I was working out in the companies, I spent almost all of my career working on the engine company, and I think we all can agree, and this is where engine companies and truck companies get into a little battle there, friendly battle. But the engine company is the backbone of the American Fire Service. And as I teach members in my organization, a chainsaw has never put out a structure fire. And some of you guys that spend a lot of time on the truck, you probably will agree with that statement, and some of you may disagree. But people and water and a sound plan is what puts out a fire. And so those of us who are on this call that spend most of our time working on the truck, I apologize in advance, but I think you guys get where I'm coming from. Looks like we have Larry back. So Larry, you want to go ahead and give us an introduction again, please? Oops, let me go ahead and unmute you. Let me go back up there. Let's see. All right, go ahead, Larry. You are unmuted now.
Okay, good. I said it must be this cheap internet I'm paying for. I don't know. But anyway, like I said before, Larry Conley, Captain, St. Louis, Missouri, Truck 13C, just celebrated 28 years on April 13th. I'm still excited about doing the job and still excited about learning. And been with the ISFSI for a few years now, past director at large, so I had a great time being on the board when I did my term. So just excited to be invited and to be on the call and to exchange ideas, learn, and hopefully disseminate some useful information as well.
Good. And Larry, since you currently are assigned to a truck company, we're definitely going to get your perspective. And then, all joking aside, no matter where you go in the American Fire Service, when you ask individuals what are responsibilities of a truck company or a crew, you get a myriad of responses: ventilation, forcible entry, search, and all those things are true. But at the end of the day, the essential function of a truck company while operating at a structure fire, whether it's residential or commercial, is to support the needs of the engine company. And whether that support means forcing a door, whether that support means throwing additional ground ladders, whether that support means a coordinated ventilation effort, all those things fall under support operations. So if we look at a truck company from that perspective of supporting the needs of an engine company, the end goal will be satisfied. And then more importantly, the men and women who went to that emergency to put out the fire and rescue individuals, they will all go home in the same capacity that they came to work. So to kind of bound this discussion as we continue moving on, our focus today is on engine company success, and hopefully this will be the first of many roundtable discussions that we'll have on operations here on behalf of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. When we talk about engine company success, it can mean many things. But for the purpose of the discussion right here, we're talking about the roles and responsibilities of an engine company and that engine officer, whether he or she is a lieutenant or sergeant, captain, whatever you call it in your organization, a supervisor, a manager, what he or she needs to do throughout all phases of a structure fire. So that's more or less what's going to bound our discussion today as we talk about engine company success and engine company operations. And once again, keep in mind, based on geography, based on staffing levels, based on traditions and overall philosophies, we all have different ways of doing things. So go in and come out of this webinar, discussion, virtual discussion, whatever you want to call it, with an open-minded. So Brian, tell us a little bit about how engine companies operate out in Kirkwood.
So uniquely, we do not have, in St. Louis County, we do not have dedicated trucks and engines. So we run some quints, we run some engines. St. Louis County is broke up into 43 different fire departments and fire districts. So we rely heavily on automatic aid, and then we back up St. Louis City, even though Larry would probably deny that, and they come to us as well. That said, it does make for unique circumstances because we do value truck work, we do value engine work. And so we have set up a process in place countywide through the Fire Ground Safety Initiative to put in practical application arrival order assignments. So first arriving, basically, no matter whether you arrive on the scene as a quint or you arrive on the scene as an engine, it doesn't matter. You're going to take and basically operate as an engine company. Second due will support that operation, and then third and the fifth take those truck company functions, and so on. And then it explains out each of the roles from there. So it's kind of interesting, not working in the areas that have a true truck and engine running out of a dual station or even supporting the operations of each other. We have to do functional assignments in that way. And I think uniquely outside of larger metropolitan areas, I think a lot of America functions in that kind of in that functional aspects, if you will. But I'm the same. Damon, I completely agree. As much as it is fun to go and do truck work and break things and search and operate off of a hose line, to your point, no fires have been put out without the water, right? Other than a big wildland fire, particularly, where you cut out the fuel. So I think it's gonna be interesting to hear everybody's discussions today and kind of the perspectives of that critical first due arriving engine officer, making some fundamental tactical decisions on line placement, line size, flow rates, determining flows, nozzles. All those things are going to be, I think, interesting to just kind of bounce ideas and talk about today.
Okay. Good. Thank you, sir. And as you guys can see right here on this screen right here, these are two photos of a incident that most of us in the fire service are familiar with. This is the Ghost Ship Fire that unfortunately took place a couple years ago in the city of Oakland that resulted in the loss of over 36 lives. So later on in this presentation, when we talk about residential task level activities, or what's commonly referred to as strategies and tactics versus residential, we're going to have a in-depth discussion on that, because as I stated repeatedly, oftentimes, regardless of the type of fire that we go to, engine and truck firefighters, we stay in that same mindset. And a couple of years ago, I had the fortunate opportunity to sit in on a case study presentation by a member of the Worcester, Massachusetts Fire Department. At the time of the incident in Worcester, he was a company officer, and at the time he was giving the presentation, he was a deputy chief, I believe. And as he was talking about the organization, the makeup of the city of Oakland kept coming to mind. Older city, traditional fire department, aggressive fire department, for lack of a better term, for those of you who like to stick to that moniker of aggressive firefighting, whatever that means. I'm still trying to, 23 years in the profession, I'm still trying to find out what aggressive firefighting means. I like to say smart firefighting, and when you interject with smart firefighting, I think it's a better way to describe it. But for those of us who are traditionalists, for the purpose of this discussion, we'll stick to aggressive firefighting. But as we continue on, Larry, I follow you on Facebook, and I see some of the great things that you do with your truck company in regards to training and all that good stuff. So although this is engine company operations, but for the purpose of this next question right here, what does roll call look like? And the reason why I asked that question, because roll call in some organizations is formal, other organizations is very informal, but I'm a true believer that roll call sets the tone of the day for success. And in the absence of roll call and assignments and going over expectations, then we are potentially setting our personnel up to have an unsuccessful day. So Larry, what does roll call look like in your organization? I mean, your station.
Yeah, first off, I want to say that in kind of conjunction with what Brian was saying, we're identified as a truck company, but not because that we are we consider truck work or a designated truck company will be our hook and ladders. The reason we have assigned truck 13, pumper 24.
All right.
We losing Larry
Looks
again?
like Larry, he's having some issues. Oh, there he goes.
Oh, really? Am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay. We had what we call the quint concept, and all of our apparatuses were quints. Chief Jenkinson has since changed some of that, and now we have pumpers and quints. So when we say truck, what we're doing is letting anybody who's listening on the assignments know that you have a quint showing up to this particular assignment opposed to a pumper, which doesn't have a aerial ladder on the top. So my point is that we get a lot of first-in fires in our district, and when we do that, we show up initially to do what we would consider engine company work, and then even if a second company shows up and they're on a pumper, they would still do the truck because we operate our SOPs based on assignment and not necessarily to the vehicle you're assigned to, unless it's a hook and ladder or rescue squad, and then more defined assignments. But anyway, to answer your question about roll call, I've always believed, because like you said, it sets the tone for what we have to do for today and the expectations. I get a lot of new people coming out the academy periodically, and I'm a lot set the tone with the new people to let them know that this is the way it should be, to make sure we're all on the page. And it's important that we touch base, understand where we are as far as how our days should go, and then that way, everybody's clear, and there's nobody saying nobody told me anything. And then especially now during this the COVID outbreak, there's new information today. So in addition to the information that we normally would pass on from the other shifts or memos and directives and stuff, with this new COVID outbreak, now more than ever need to be passing on the most current information so we'll know how to act throughout the course of the day. But I always have liked it, even before this pandemic, as a way to touch base and make sure that we're all on the same page. So in my opinion, it's probably one of the most critical to do at the beginning of the shift.
Correct. And just to add on from a West Coast perspective, in the Oakland Fire Department, roll call is, well, at least when I first came into the organization, was a very, very formal function that took place. Showed up the roll call in your Class B uniform. Even prior to me coming in, folks had to line up, and the company officer, he or she, would inspect personnel for readiness, make sure their uniforms are cleaned and pressed, boots for shine. Fast forward a little bit, Larry. I know you like to keep a clean pair of boots. I definitely envy you for that. I've learned over my short 23 years in the fire service to pick my battles in terms of expectations. So, but nevertheless, so in Oakland Fire Department, roll call meant the following to me. It meant we were there prior to the official start of the workday. For us, roll call started at 7:55 in the morning, although we didn't officially start getting paid at 8 o'clock. And what I did as it pertained to engine company success and expectations is that I gave out responsibilities. So for us, with having a 4-0 staff, and I know some of you on you 2-0 staffing, some of you may have 3-0, but in my world, 4-0 staffing, what it meant, my engineer, my expectation of him or her was, if we were assigned Rick or Rick, then you, as an individual, you were tasked with grabbing the Rick equipment off the truck. In Oakland Fire Department, all 7 of our trucks is where we keep the Rick equipment. I know some organizations they have designated engine companies that are serving as Rick look like. And the reason why I gave that critical assignment, and also gave the assignment to the engineer, was to monitor our RIT channel. In our county, if someone activates the orange button or the emergency response button, it will automatically switch that channel to channel 16. So because that engineer was off probation, sometimes we would have a probationary firefighter and a probationary paramedic. And I didn't want to bestow those critical responsibilities on him or her. I gave that responsibility to the engineer. Now, my nozzle person, I would say, hey, you're the nozzle person for the day. So they're in that mindset. My lead off, that's a term that we use here in the Oakland Fire Department. The lead off is responsible for securing the water supply. Once again, I know organizations with 2 and 3-0 staffing, Your SOPs, SOGs may call for you to wrap the hydrant or for that first engine to go in absent a water supply, and then responsibility for the second. I made those responsibilities, assigned them in roll call. Unfortunately, what I see today among some companies is they'll wait and whatever side of the rig that the hydrant is on, that person is the lead off. And to me, you know, that's a big no-no. At morning time and roll call, I want that individual who's responsible for securing that water supply, which is critical, to know that that is their function for today. Because I may have an overtime or a person who's trading who's spent most of his or her career working on a truck company. Company people are not good with engine company operations, but if it's been 15, 20 years since that individual has touched a four-way, we use a four-way device in our department called a HUMAT. Most folks call it a Hummer, but it's a HUMAT. I did not want, when the bell went off and we showed up on scene at a fire, to be the first time that firefighter had a chance to play with that four-way. So it was just some particular assignments that I was a stickler for, and as a chief officer, those are expectations of my company officers, especially those who are working on the engine company. So that's part of building that success from an engine company operations, setting up expectations at roll call. Because as we all know, that bell can go off at 10 minutes after 8 for a structure fire, or we may go the whole day without a structure fire, or we may get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning for a structure fire, and we want our people prepared for success. So that's what roll call looks like to me. That's why roll call is so important to me. Now as a chief officer, but more importantly, or equally important when I was a company officer. Brian, in your organization, 2-0 or 3-0 staffing?
So we do 3-0 staffing, and prior to Kirkwood, I worked in another department, and like I said, rode as a captain on the truck. And to your point, I think those clear expectations first thing in the morning, to the point, it reminds guys that, hey, you're coming to work as a firefighter, and at any point in time throughout this 24, 40-hour shift, we could get a fire. And so setting those clear expectations, putting them up on the board, we had writing assignment boards, and on that writing assignment, it clearly stated what your job function was. And it didn't deviate from that. To your point of, well, I'm on this side of the truck, I'm on that side of the truck. No, you're the nozzle guy today for this entire shift. So I think it's clearly important. And then to the second point, like I said, it just gets everybody in the mindset that they're back at work, right? They've been off for 4 days or 10 days, whatever. No more. We're back at work and get your head in the game. So I'm a big expectation guy. I think it sets a clear tone for the rest of the shift.
Okay. And then for those of us who are listening in current live, or who will listen in later on this particular webinar, to both current and aspiring company officers, even in the absence of having a formal roll call in your organization, I would encourage you to implement this practice. If nothing else, this is that time to spend half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour talking about some fire department related. Because I'm a realist. I know in every fire service fire department, whether career, combination, volunteer, big city, small city, busy, unbusy, we all have those companies where they will go the whole day and the word fire will never get mentioned during that 24 or 48 hour period of working together. That's just a harsh reality. And for those who disagree with me, fine with that, but that's the unfortunate reality. So I know many of us on this call, we're big supporters of training, and if we weren't, we wouldn't be on this webinar, and two, we wouldn't be members of this esteemed organization known as the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. I always get tongue-tied when I say ISFSI, so I just use the long version of it. But back to my point, use that morning roll call, talk about a LOD case study, pull out a SOG or SOP, and talk about that just to keep folks in the loop in regard to what's going on. So as we continue this discussion on engine company success and bounding it around the success at a structure fire, as you can see right here on the screen, there's a quote, and I have to give credit where credit is due. And this quote, I first heard this quote from Chief Brunacini, and it says the first 5 minutes determines the next 5 hours. So engine company officers, the first 5 minutes determines the next 5 hours. Typically across the United States, that first in company at a structure fire is typically our engine or Quint. In the case of Missouri, I know you guys are real big on the Quint concept. I'm not going to leave you guys out or discriminate, but typically that first company on scene is an engine. And depending on your staffing, depending on your organization's SOPs, the expectations of that first in officer vary. So Larry, first in company at a structure fire, what does this statement mean to you? The first 5 minutes determines the next 5 hours. Let me make sure he's, hold on a second. Larry, you can keep yourself unmuted. Go ahead and start back over again.
Okay, I was saying that it kind of coincides with what I try to teach when I'm talking, teaching a recruit class or talking to our engine company, that we do when we first show up and how we set things up. The next companies to come into that particular fire will complement or compensate for your decisions. So if you set it up right and do things according to what we practice in our SOGs and SOPs and make successful calls, then everybody who shows up after that complements what you've done, and fire goes out quicker and things are done safer. And in that regard, of course, if you show up and you goof it up in the first few minutes, then we have to spend the rest of the fire compensating for what you goofed up. So it is very important because that's the tone. It's the same parallel you just got to be talking about with roll call. It's set for the day. So that tone setting, attitude, and their readiness, and everybody's kind of on the same page when you show up at a fire is critical. And that's why another reason doing our roll call, like similar to what you do, is we make sure everybody is tuned in the same way. I want everybody's frequency to be the same because I don't want to make all the decisions and then everybody's kind of starting from go based on my decision. If we all show up and we all kind of thinking the same way, all I have to do is just kind of nod and nudge instead of do a lot of ordering. So if we're all coming in synergized with the same mentality, all 4 of us, then the work gets started right away. And we just kind of, do what we do to make sure we set that tone, and that way everybody can complement our efforts but definitely if we disjointed our roll call, we're not sure about each other's roles. I'm thinking one thing, my driver's thinking another thing, my lead officer's thinking something, and my plug man is not thinking on the same page. Then it looks like, the Three Stooges movie at the fire. So we don't want that. So we try real hard to make sure that we're all on the same page, so we could really set the tone for that first 5 minutes, and hopefully last 5 hours if we do it right.
Exactly. So before I get to Brian with this follow-up question, I always have to put this disclaimer out there. ICS, Incident Command System, or IMS, whatever you call it in your region, is not designed to put out fires. It was never meant to put out fires, at least fires as we can see right here on the screen. However, ICS is designed to manage the people and resources that show up at an incident. And as I also like to say, it is designed to manage the chaos that we as firefighters create when we arrive on scene. And then for those of us who, probably heard what chaos stands for, Chief has arrived on scene. Some of you may find that funny. Some of you may say that's emphatically true. I tend to disagree, but nevertheless. So Brian, in your organization, what is the expectation of that first new company officer from an incident management perspective in terms of size up, giving a report on the radio, setting that initial incident action plan or IAP? What's the expectation?
So I think the initial expectation is calm. So, you know, we've all arrived or been riding to a fire or riding to see it or driving even whatever. And that initial company officer arrives on scene and you can just tell in their voice, one, they're nervous. They don't have control of the situation. They're not sure they're going to be able to mitigate the situation. And that just ramps everybody up. So nothing productive is going to come of that. So I always tell people, if you're nervous, take a deep breath and then say what you're going to say. But try to say them in calm tones, because it's just going to create more chaos that's unnecessary. After that, of course, then it's the size up, right? We want them to do paint a good picture for us of what they got, where it's going, and where they're headed with the problem. So, you know, laying a line, we got our own water supply, we're stretching 1.75 inches, 1.5 inches, we're going interior, we're staying exterior, we're going for whatever it might be, and then any type of follow-up report associated with that. As I stated earlier, we do have an SOG in place that kind of states pretty clearly what the second, third, fourth, and pretty much the entire first alarm is supposed to do. But that said, it's a guide, right? We always expect the company officers to kind of think on their feet, and if they have to deviate, so be it. So we wanted to kind of put into where anyone else needs to go. So if the second arriving needs to do something different than the SOG, dictate that. And then, of course, just placement of their apparatus correctly, making sure they're leaving room for that truck company if we need a ladder in front of the building, and making good tactical decisions with their equipment, correct lines and that sort of stuff. So, but to your point, I mean, that first 5 minutes, I mean, you know, we see it all the time where you know, a line could stretch short, right? So the 200-foot pre-connect doesn't make it, or they pull a pre-connect and they need a 2.5-inch line, to your pictures earlier of the building fire, which you know, I'm sure we'll talk about commercial versus residential. And those sort of things, I mean, that just throws a big hiccup in the mitigation strategy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I agree. And you know, you mentioned about something coming up short on a hose stretch. Once again, based on geography, our hose load complements, they vary. Here in the Oakland Fire Department, our pre-connects are hot lines. We have a bumper line, it's 100 foot. Then we have 2 cross lays, 150, 200, and then we have a combination 1.75 inch, 2.5, 500 foot dead load that we carry. So we have a couple different options that we can use. Unfortunately, oftentimes we always go to that cross lay. And I know in some parts of the country, engine companies, they don't have cross lays, everything, or I mean, not cross lays, they don't have hot lines or pre-connects, everything is dead low. So whole nother conversation, but to the point is, how do we prevent ourselves from coming up short? That's where training comes into place, going out in your first 2 districts, and a training chief or chief in any matter should not get mad at you as a company officer for taking you and your crew out to do some training, because that's part of our job of being mission ready, all risk or all hazard readiness, you know, however you want to determine. Just kind of adding on, Brian, to what you just mentioned. Once again, I am a big believer in the use of ICS with the full knowledge that it's not designed to actually put out the fires, to manage the people, ensure the effective use of resource, and it's also a safety mechanism to protect the personnel. So one of the things I expect that first in company officer, which is typically an engine officer, when he or she comes on scene, is prior to doing what we call the initial arrival report. And you ask people in my organization, I'm a stickler for terminology, especially when we're working with different agencies. You know, size up versus initial arrival report, they mean 2 different things. And people in my organization, they used to fight me on it. And I actually pulled out a document from 1960, where firefighters in Oakland, the size up was a mental evaluation. And those of us who have taken NFA classes, National Fire Academy classes, those critical factors. So to the point, those of you who are listening, aspiring and current company officers, when you arrive on scene, look at that building and look at those critical factors. And what I like to teach and tell folks, if this building could talk to you, what is it saying? What is the height of the building? Is there fire present? Where's the fire present? Smoke conditions, setback, occupancy type, vacant, unoccupied. All those variables by themselves, they mean something. And when you bring 2 or more variables together, they mean something. And then that should help dictate your action. Unfortunately, across the American Fire Service, we go into automatic mode. As soon as we arrive on scene, the air brake is set, we get off the rig and we start running. Now, yes, we know we can't, as company officers, we cannot use the traditional scientific decision-making method to make decisions. We can't spend 15 minutes looking at this building and then come up with a decision. We got to make decisions in critical seconds, using those mental modes that we have in the forefront of our brain. And those of us, are familiar with Sources of Power and Gary Klein, who've done some phenomenal work in that area. That's how we make decisions based on recall for the most part. So size up those critical factors. What do they mean by themselves and what do they mean in conjunction? Then that's when we, as Chief mentioned, get that initial arrival report and paint the picture of what we have. First in company officer, you make the initial plan. Now, as I tell my folks, I'm not expecting you to pull out ICS forms and a clipboard and start writing stuff down. The only time the first in company officer should be doing that, in my opinion, is if he or she is going to be in command for the duration of this incident, if he or she is operating at a technical incident such as a hazmat, confined space, high or a low angle, then you pull that out. But at a structure fire, that first, unless that's the SOP for your organization, that first in company officer shouldn't be writing stuff down. That IAP is up here in your head. So those are the expectations that we have of our people, to establish those divisions and groups early so that as more resources come, you can place them under a division or a group supervisor, and then they can start managing those resources. So that's how, when we talk about those first 5 minutes, determine those next 5 hours, that's not to say that if you start off a little rocky, a little chaotic, you can't recover. But typically what I've found is when you start off rocky or chaotic, oftentimes it just continues to go downhill. Chief, picking on you for another moment or two on this. What's the expectations of the first due company in regards to water supply? And after you give your answer, then I'll explain why I asked that particular question.
So it's one of those things, they have to determine the water supply, whether they're going to get it themselves or they're going to leave it for the second due. The big thing with the water supply for me, in my mind, is the communication of it. Either they have their own water supply or they don't. And I'm a big believer in booster tanks. And so I don't want you to delay your water supply in relation to getting that initial water on the fire. To your point of, the IAPs and things like that. And when we do these scenarios, everybody wants to go through it. People have to be realistic with their time and how long it takes for their time to grab a hydrant, drop in. Not saying we shouldn't do it, and I'm a big advocate for it if it's close, but I also don't want to delay that booster water getting on the fire. I think research has proven that fast water is what is effective in mitigating a lot of these scenes.
Mm-hmm. And Larry, as a truck officer, and we know that we play an important role in the success of engine company operations. When you arrive on scene and you have a pumper or an engine company that's already there, what are your expectations or communications to that engine company officer to help satisfy engine company success and also overall success? Whoops, hold on, Larry. Let me put you back on. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
If we show up and we're, let's say, second in, there's a first in company there. Our SOG suggests that if there's a company officer already inside the building, then the second due officer stays out, and so you can have eyes outside as well. So we have an interior officer and an exterior officer for the time being, and then when the first in battalion chief shows up, then he takes control of the scene from there. But our initial vision or goal is just to support that first in attack line with proper ventilation and help with truck work and search and rescue and things of that sort to support that first in company. If we're third in and our support looks a little different, where we will bring in a second line and we will also back up as far as water supply, back up a second supply source to the first in company. So after we secure that, then we take in the second hose line to, if necessary, to back up the first in attack line.
Okay,
So
Larry,
everything in St. Louis builds on itself as far as our SOGs are concerned.
okay, so let's go back to ventilation. A lot of research out there that's substantiating what we previously known about ventilation. A lot of good research out there that's providing us some new information about ventilation, the importance of it, when to do it, how to do it, all that other good stuff. To ensure engine company success, and we'll remove this picture right here because as all of us can agree, this is an advanced operating. We're probably going to be applying water solely from the outside, regardless of the makeup of your organization. But let's say the traditional two-story wood frame structure where you have fire on the second floor. As a truck company in St. Louis, do you throw ground ladders and go up there and cut a hole where you think a hole needs to be cut? Or is there some type of communication with the company or companies on the inside to get an idea of the best, well, if a ventilation hole is needed, the best location for that?
Well, to get back to your what you just said, the key thing is communication. And if we communicate correctly, then we know what we're doing is going to help the situation. So if that means cutting a hole, then that's going to help. But we just don't arbitrarily do it or shouldn't. And then also if there's and then there's ways to ventilate. You don't want to add, and I think we've known now even better now to just, when I first came on the job, the attitude was just open this thing up, bust every window out, cut every hole, and just do everything because you need to be doing something. And then we thought that was kind of letting the smoke and gases and the fire out so that the interior attack company could do their job. And in some cases, I can say I've lived through where that has worked in some cases, but in most of the time, especially now with modern interiors, even if it is an older building or just straight up type 5 type structures, you're hurting more when you introduce more oxygen, especially if you do it before water is supplied. So now we've had a paradigm shift to where more people are realizing that it's better to communicate, number one, and number two, do some smart ventilation. Ventilate where it's necessary, close doors, don't bust out every window because you don't want to draw the fire to where the air is. And so between the communication and better ventilation, we fight fires a lot safer now. And it doesn't take away from the aggressiveness. It just makes sure that we don't add to the problem with the bad introduction of oxygen.
Yeah. For those of us out there listening, Larry said it in such an eloquent manner. Smart firefighting, communicating, and getting that good intel from that interior crew, because we don't want to put them in harm's. Our goal is engine company success. We start prematurely cutting holes and knocking out windows, then we could be putting them in that flow path. And we don't want that to happen. We could be potentially, if water is not ready or there, we could potentially adding to that oxygen side of the triangle, of the fire triangle. And those are all things that are not in line with engine company success. Transitioning over, one picture is a commercial building. Bottom one is a single family dwelling. And as we continue to grow here in the United States and these big buildings moving away from the major cities and urban areas, now out into the suburban and rural areas, in most parts of the United States, we have big boxes or commercial buildings in all city types. Brian, in your organization, when you guys are teaching strategies and tactics to your company officers and your firefighters in general, what are some of the things you guys are emphasizing, do's and don'ts, in a residential versus a commercial building?
So obviously hose line size, that's a definite do and don't. You know, I always equate this. I always tell guys, you know, just, you know, if you think it's a 2.5 inch fire, pull a 2.5 inch fire for the knockdown. 2 3/4 don't make a 2.5. So make sure you're pulling the correct size line. Even if it takes a couple crews to get it in place, you're going to be much more effective once you start flowing water to take down that fire. The other thing too is obviously, you know, access and egress. So, you know, residential structure fires, you know, we do unfortunately kill a lot of firefighters in residential structure fires, but, you know, it's one of those things that you typically can find yourself pretty close to an exit. You don't find yourself typically too far deep into these buildings. On these commercial structures, you know, light smoke showing on a commercial structure is a whole different ball game than light smoke showing on a residential structure. So I think your parameters, to your point with the Klein statement earlier about recognition, prime decision making, and things like that, and our sequencing, you know, when we talk about those things, we just don't have a huge database for these commercial fires. And so I think a lot of times we find ourselves in those hiccups when we go back to, well, what this light smoke, I mean, Home Depot with light smoke showing at the front door, you know, in my eyes, that's a second alarm, you know, minimum, you know, just in the size of the structure and the ability to fill that kind of building. But then the same thing on a residential structure, it could be dry cooking. So I think we just got to, you know, look at the bigger picture. And I loved your statement earlier of what is this building telling me? If this building was talking, I just need to listen. And I'm going to give you credit, but I'm going to probably be stealing that from you and telling my guys that.
All right.
That's such a
I probably stole
statement.
it from somebody.
Oh, just like anything in the fire service, nothing's new, right?
Right.
But what a prolific statement to make is see what this building's telling me, and then let it talk to me for a second and figure that out. I think that's just, and that's the keys. I think the do's and don'ts is that, you know, see what the building's telling me, read the building, read the fire, see what's going on, see where we're headed with this thing, and then try to give it a little bit of a prediction. What I got now, you know, from the time it takes me to pull a line, get water flowing to where it's going to be, I got to kind of have that prediction factor in there. So I think those are keys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And once again, those of us who are listening, current and aspiring engine company officers, that building on the left, that roller skating rink, insert Home Depot, insert Lowe's, insert a 24-hour fitness or a gym. You have that. Incident like this, advanced operations, but as Brian was mentioning earlier, you pull up to a Home Depot and you got smoke issuing from the front door. Yes, that's a second, possibly even a third alarm. Call them. You can always turn them away, but don't get in the catch-up, get in the mode where I need that second alarm, I need that third alarm. Then you got that reflex time. It's going to take 10, 15 minutes for them to get there, maybe even longer, depending on what part of the country you're working in. But hose line selection, this is the area where hose line selection and the number of personnel we have on scene, this is where all across the United States we get into trouble. There are organizations out there that are adamant about pulling an 1 3/4 inch to a commercial building. Well, Damon, it's much easier to maneuver. We haven't had a lot of training and practice on a 2.5. And I tell folks, and Brian, you can steal this quote too. The fire is not going to burn with less intensity because you're not used to stretching a 2.5. It's not going to burn with less intensity because you hate the 2.5. You hate the individuals in the organization, or dislike, hate. You dislike the individuals in your organization who implemented the 2.5, the people who are proponents of it. You have to have a sufficient amount of GPM to suppress the heat release rate. That's science. That's not an East Coast thing. That's not a West Coast thing. It's not a Midwest thing. That is science. Fire burns the same all across the world. So keep that in mind. My second point, call for those engine company officers. You arrive on scene. You are the IC. You can call for a second or third alarms. And I say that some organizations only a chief officer can call for additional alarm. I never understood that philosophy. Hopefully, that's not a widespread practice. You are the IC. ICS does not is not dependent or recognized rank. Okay, so keep that in mind. Then last, from an engine company success, the engine crew gets trapped, lost, or disoriented inside a big box such as this. Call for that second or third alarm, and you have rig companies on all four sides of this building, not just at the front door where the hose line or hose lines went into place here. So those are my takeaways there, engine company success. Larry, large, busy organization. Tell us a story about a prominent commercial fire in St. Louis, and what were some of the takeaways?
There's been a few of them. The most recent one comes to mind probably is we had a fire in it was a huge storage place. They stored a lot of different things there, and I still don't understand everything they stored there, but it was kind of almost like a holding place, like people would ship things to St. Louis, and then these different companies will come there to pick up their supplies. So they had a lot of different things in there that, created a kind of a circus kind of fire load, so to speak. And so it caught fire, and it was hard to find the fire. I mean, they saw a lot of smoke, but had a lot of trouble finding the seat of the fire. And then they somehow oxygen got introduced, and they found the fire right away. Then at that point, it took the whole building like right now. And we were lucky we didn't really lose anybody in that fire, because it became a very reactionary thing, because it was a lot of smoke, but it still seemed like it was a doable thing to get in there and get it. But but the not knowing what was inside, I think, not knowing everything that was inside. I think the first dude coming there, of course, doing their inspections, had an idea there was a lot of stuff, but it was like a maze of stuff in this warehouse. And it burned a long time. And we had plug-in detail almost there a week, and we lost one of our apparatuses because the building collapsed on the apparatus. So they had to try to, it was funny because it bent the cab so bad that they were still able to drive it away, and they kind of, drove it away like this, But we were, the takeaways in there were, be careful about where you introduce the oxygen, and then number two, I think we did a very good job at knowing the accountability. Nobody got lost, because that was basically kind of a widowmaker type of fire, where you could have easily lost people in the building because it was so divided up, keeping everybody's supplies in order. So we learned a lot of lessons from that. They did an after action report for the whole department that we can review, and just kind of help with our takeaways on that. So, but a lot of people I talked to that were there that I know, it was a lot of pucker factors going on there. A lot of people changed to underwear when they get back to the firehouse. So.
And for those of us who are listening, remember, luck and hope are not plans. Luck and hope are not plans. So as we close out
you got
this
a lot of stuff
presentation,
you got a lot of stuff to write down there, Brian.
I ran out of ink on my pen.
I'm saying degree out right here.
Stop it, guys. Stop it. All right. So as we close out this presentation, both of you guys are national speakers, very active in the fire service, which I definitely admire. So for our listeners out there, and current and future members of the international instructors, what are some tips that you guys can offer that are in line with this statement of remaining students of the profession? We'll, Brian, and then we'll close out with Larry.
So, for me, I always tell you guys this. I said, you made an investment initially in your career. For a lot of people in the fire service, both financial as well as time. For a lot of us, we paid our own way through the fire academy. We paid for an EMT or a paramedic license. We spent countless hours in an academy or classrooms to initially get this job as a firefighter, right? And then for whatever reason, in our minds, sometimes as we go through our careers, we feel like it's owed to us to have everything then reimbursed, right? So we want our time reimbursed, or it's got to be on duty. I can't pay for that class unless somebody pays for it for me. I'm not doing it unless there's some benefit to me. And I think there's some onus on us as a fire service and firefighters to kind of pay it forward, right? We've been given an incredible opportunity in this profession to do a job that is very noble, is unlike anything else, and will give you everything you want in life if you just give a little bit to it. And I think that's what we need to do is as you go through your career, seek those opportunities. And they're going to be tough, both financially and physically and time constrictive. But on the other side of it, look at the benefit that you're going to have for your career. You're going to be able to go on these fires and stand out as a well-known firefighter that's making the right decisions. You're going to be the guy that understands what's going on inside that building better than others. And in a job, another quote, and I just can't know enough about a job that can kill you, right? And so I think that goes a long way. We need to know as much as we can about this job. And to your first statement, never stop learning. Never ever stop learning, because you'll never know enough.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And then Mr. Larry.
Brian kind of stole my quote, because that's exactly what I was thinking. You should never sleep on anything that could kill you. And there's people who have been firefighters for 20, 30 years, and then there are people who've been working for the fire department for 20 or 30 years. Don't be that person who's been working for the fire department. Just show up and I got time on, and this is the way we did it back in 92. If we did everything like we did back in 92, I didn't have a cell phone in 92 because I couldn't afford it, and we didn't have, all this Google and all this kind of crap back then. So things change, buildings change, different things that you can learn more about. What we do in the fire service has changed. So if you got that atrophy mindset to where your brain is atrophy and you're stuck in 1992 or whenever you came on the job, then you're going to kill yourself or kill somebody in your crew. It's just a matter of time. If nothing else, you're going to kill the morale in the firehouse. So everybody needs to constantly, refresh and sharpen the saw and constantly learn. I mean, I teach a lot, but I'll tell you, I still get a bigger kick out just sitting in a good class, learning something and have some takeaways so I could just, add to the toolbox. And the toolbox got plenty of room. I don't have enough tools in my toolbox. So I'm always looking to put new tools in there. I'm always reading. I try to read a lot of fire department stuff. I try to read a lot of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the fire department. I try to read a lot of people stuff, especially since I teach leadership. And because at the end of the day, we have to motivate people who we work with, whether you are an officer or not. And you help people. You have to be submitted to helping people. And so it's always funny to me to hear people talk about, the citizens pay for us to put our lives on the line. But what kind of investment are you making sure that you can guarantee that you show up with your A game every day? And what kind of guarantee can you make sure that, you are supporting engine company success? What are you doing? Are you exercising? Are you reading? Are you, going to classes? And to Brian's point, me and Brian talk about that all the time. I probably bought a couple of more houses and a couple of more cars with the money I spent out of my pocket just on learning, not waiting for it to be compensated. I'm going to school now out of my pocket. I'm not waiting on somebody to do it for me. Because at the end of the day, if I get killed based on me trying to bargain my way through my learning process, shame on me. So we all have to make sure that we take that investment seriously. And when we invest in ourselves and see the importance in ourselves, hopefully that transfers to helping inspire that in our crew, and definitely the ultimate is who we serve in our community. And so everything we do for ourselves, is better for the community that we serve.
Okay. Gentlemen, on that note, it was a pleasure to sit here for this last hour and talk about engine company success to our viewers out there. Thank you for logging in. Hopefully you got some out of this, picked up a nugget or two that you can not only take and, as Larry said, add to your toolbox, but also add to the toolbox of your fellow personnel who work in your organization, because the success of this organization is predicated on sharing and learning, or learning and sharing. We can't take in a bunch of information and withhold it from others, because that does a disservice to the organization and your community. So once again, thank you for taking an hour out of your busy day for this important discussion on engine company success. Take care and continue to be students of your profession.
All right, bye.